I suspect that the first fear that these three fishermen faced was the one that Pastor Mary addressed this last week. It was the fear of loneliness, of course. Jesus had asked Peter, James, and John to follow him, and they were being invited to step away from everybody and everyone that they knew and that mattered in their lives. And yes, they would be doing it together, but they were no three musketeers saying forth, all for one, one for all. Jesus helped them to overcome that first fear. They would not be lonely. Jesus had invited them into a relationship with himself. And I'm guessing that was enough. More so, he was giving the three fishermen a vision of something greater than themselves, something we've been calling the good. Do not be afraid. Have no fear, Jesus says. From now on, you will be catching people. It was a huge lifestyle change, right? It was an unfamiliar calling to an unknown world. For the moment, Jesus helped them to overcome their fear of loneliness. But what next? What must have stirred up next as fear and anxiety as the three followed Jesus down the path, away from the lake and away from the stuff at which they were fairly competent? I imagine their fear must have taken this path. What if we fail? We know nothing about the business of fishing for people. What if we don't succeed? Last week, Pastor Mary talked about the fear of loneliness, and today I'm talking about this second fear, the fear of failure, the fear of not succeeding. People deal with the fear of failing in different ways. Here are some examples. Thomas Edison. He invented the light bulb, but his first attempts were failures completely. Of those failures, he said, I've not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that did not work. J.K. Rowling, famous author of Harry Potter books, she was jobless, divorced, and living on welfare in 1993. Only 3 chapters of her first book about Harry Potter had been completed. 2 years later, her first script of an entire book was rejected by 12 major publishers. A year later, a small publisher gave her £1,500 to publish a meager amount of books, about 1,000. Since then, you and I know we've seen the results of her success. 400 million Harry Potter books sold. It's amazing. In America, we worship that kind of success. And we love to hear these kinds of stories of people who, by sheer willpower and fortitude, make it. I think underneath that current, for most of us, is a fear of failure. We fear not succeeding. We fear missing the game-winning shot or losing a big case or dropping out of college. Words from Apollo 13's mission are planted in our psyche. Failure is not an option, right? So we love the stories of Edison and Rowling that inspire us to try harder, to learn from our mistakes, and to do all we can to succeed. Have courage, persist, and you'll succeed. Pull yourself up. Yet there are stories. There are stories of persons who were not afraid to fail, of persons who persisted in their mission or their calling with no hope of succeeding, with no intention of succeeding. Theirs is what we call fearless faith. I think first of Dr. Paul Farmer. Dr. Farmer is a medical relief agency founder called Partners in Health. He is improving healthcare for people around the world, but particularly in Haiti, and it's something to which he has dedicated his entire life. He is courageous, he is persistent, but he has no illusions about his ability to solve the root problems of global economic inequity. Worldwide success is not even a glimmer in his future. So why keep on keeping on? I think of Mother Teresa, another example, tireless, persevering, and she is well known for having said, God has not called me to be successful. He has called me to be faithful. Why would she not pin her hopes on having some big success in her lifetime? And I think of Peter, James, and John trudging along behind Jesus on the way away from the lake and away from the security of kinfolk and fishing boats. They knew those things. They knew nothing about fishing for people. I have a strong hunch that fear would have pestered their hearts strongly in this way. What if we fail? We don't know what we're doing. What will everybody say if this goes south? Still, they followed, sometimes even at the risk of death over the next several years. And why? Because Jesus had gifted them with a glimpse of God's future, a glimpse of the good. Let's take a look at the glimpse that Jesus had given them. So first, let's talk fishing. Nighttime was the best time for fishing there. It was when the fish were nearest the surface and closest to the shore. Easy to catch, but during the day, the fish dove deep into the center of the lake. And it was during the day that Jesus had asked them to go out to the center of the lake and let down your nets. We can imagine what Peter might have thought. It doesn't make sense. You're out of your element, Jesus. Catch fish in the middle of the day, in the middle of the lake? Maybe one, maybe two, but that's all. And remember what happens next? They sailed out to the middle and they caught so many fish that their nets were breaking. And what else? Peter, James, and John, they got a glimpse of God's future. Dr. Farmer and Mother Teresa did too. It's what we call the good. It's a promise that God's net will ultimately gather all of God's loved ones. It's a future where the world is set to rights and where all people are fed and there are no global inequities. It's our promised future of the resurrection of our own bodies and a life that God gives that does not end. So this begs the question, what failure is there to fear? God wins in the long term, and we get to be a part of it now. It's pretty cool. Here's how Søren Kierkegaard, the theologian and philosopher, put it. He acknowledged that choosing to will the good, God's future, is risky. It requires you to let go of what you are certain is going to be a failure. Like Peter being asked to fish in the wrong place at the wrong time, and you know it's not going to work. It requires you to go beyond the security of what seems practical, like fishermen leaving behind their boats and nets. And in the letting go, in the going beyond, freedom is yours. In seeking the good, there comes forth the courage you need to embrace the future as yours now. Jesus called Peter, James, and John to a path in life that was unique to them as fishermen. Even though it was going to be catching people, they knew something about fishing. Likewise, Jesus calls you to a path in life that no one can replicate. It's your path. You may already know what your path is or not. And if it is not something you know yet, pay attention to the things you care about. Be aware of the needs to which you are drawn and the injustices of this world that get under your skin. Seek the good with single-minded resolve and be not afraid. Have you seen the classic movie, The Blues Brothers? John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd played a couple of ex-convicts, wannabe musicians who were trying to raise money for an orphanage. Anytime they were asked about their work, they always responded with this standard response: "We are on a mission from God." I like that. You and I, we're on a mission from God too. And there is nothing we need to fear.